Riven Hale stood quietly in the empty living room of the house he had grown up in. The place felt colder than usual, even though the afternoon sun was shining through the tall windows. His hands trembled slightly as he held the envelope Marcus had given him only minutes earlier. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Inside that envelope were documents that would change his life forever. Across the room, his older brother Marcus leaned against the wall with a smug expression on his face, arms folded like he had just won a war. Riven had always trusted Marcus. After their parents died, Riven believed they would protect each other and keep the family together. But standing there now, Riven finally understood something painful. Marcus had never been protecting him. Marcus had been waiting. Before the story continues, if stories like this touch your heart, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps keep these powerful stories alive and allows more people around the world to hear them. Riven slowly opened the envelope. Inside were legal papers, property transfers, and signatures that looked painfully familiar. His heart dropped as he read the first line. Marcus had transferred ownership of the family company, the house, and every property their father left behind, all into his own name. Riven looked up slowly, disbelief filling his eyes. "Marcus, what is this?" he asked quietly. Marcus shrugged as if the question meant nothing. "It means the company is mine now," Marcus replied calmly. "But father left it to both of us." Marcus laughed softly. "That's what you thought." Riven's chest tightened. For years, he had trusted Marcus to handle the business while he focused on building the company's new software division. Riven had worked day and night believing they were building something together. But Marcus had been working behind his back. "You tricked me," Riven whispered. Marcus's expression hardened. "No," Marcus said coldly. "I outsmarted you." The words cut deeper than any knife. "You were always too soft, Riven. Always too trusting. Dad built an empire. And someone like you would have destroyed it." Riven clenched his fists. "So you stole everything?" Marcus smiled. "I didn't steal it. I claimed it." Silence filled the room. Riven's eyes moved slowly across the house, the walls filled with childhood memories, the photos of their parents, the furniture their mother loved. Every piece of it was now gone. "You're throwing me out?" Riven asked quietly. Marcus didn't hesitate. "You have until tonight." Those words felt like the ground collapsing beneath him. Riven grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door. Marcus didn't try to stop him. In fact, Marcus looked relieved. But just before Riven stepped outside, Marcus spoke again. "Oh, and one more thing," Marcus added. Riven paused. "You should be grateful I'm letting you leave with anything at all." Riven didn't respond. He simply walked out. The cold evening wind hit his face as he stepped onto the street. For the first time in his life, he had nowhere to go. Hours later, Riven found himself sitting on a bench in the quiet corner of a small city park. The sky had turned dark, and the streetlights flickered softly above him. He stared down at the small bag beside his feet. Everything he owned in the world now fit inside that bag. His phone buzzed. Riven looked down. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello." A soft female voice responded. "Riven." He frowned. "Yes. This is Alara." Riven's heart skipped. "Alara Quinn?" "Yes." He hadn't spoken to Alara in nearly 5 years. Back in college, she had been the one person who believed in him when nobody else did. But life had pulled them in different directions after graduation. "How did you get my number?" Riven asked. "I heard what happened," she said gently. Riven froze. "What do you mean?" "Marcus is bragging about it," Alara replied. Pain burned inside his chest. Of course Marcus was. "He took everything," Riven said quietly. "I know." Silence passed between them for a moment. Then Alara said something that made Riven sit up. "Come see me." Riven frowned. "What?" "I want to help." Riven shook his head even though she couldn't see him. "No, I can't ask you for that." "You're not asking," she said firmly. "You deserve better than what Marcus did to you." Riven stared at the ground. For the first time that night, someone sounded like they cared. "Where are you?" she asked. Riven hesitated before answering. "A park." "Stay there," Alara said. "I'm coming." 20 minutes later, a black car pulled up beside the park. Riven looked up. Alara stepped out. But she wasn't the same girl he remembered. She looked confident, successful, powerful. Her long coat moved gently in the wind as she walked toward him. "Riven," she said softly. He stood slowly. "Alara." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she pulled him into a hug. And Riven felt something he hadn't felt all day. Warmth. You shouldn't have to go through this alone, she whispered. Riven exhaled slowly. I didn't think anyone would show up for me tonight. Alara smiled gently. You always underestimate how important you are to people. Riven shook his head. Marcus made sure I lost everything. Alara looked directly into his eyes. No, she said calmly. He only thinks he did. Riven frowned. What do you mean? Alara's lips curved slightly. Because the man who took everything from you. She paused. Has no idea what you're about to become. And that night, the story of Riven Hale's life began to change. But neither Marcus nor Riven knew yet that love, betrayal, and fate were about to collide in ways none of them were ready for. Alara did not take Riven to a small apartment or a borrowed room. She drove him to a quiet glass-front building in the heart of the city, where the lights from the top floors reflected against the dark sky like stars trapped in steel. Riven looked up at the place in confusion as the car rolled to a stop. He turned to her. Why are we here? Alara parked and removed her seatbelt calmly. Because this is where I work. Riven frowned. At this hour? A small smile touched her lips. When you run the company, the hour matters less. Riven stared at her. Run the company? Alara stepped out of the car and motioned for him to follow. He did, though his mind was full of questions. Inside, the lobby was polished marble and soft gold light. A security guard at the desk immediately stood straighter when he saw her. Good evening, Miss Quinn, the guard said respectfully. Riven looked at Alara in surprise. She simply nodded. Good evening. As they entered the private elevator, Riven finally spoke. Miss Quinn. Alara exhaled with a soft laugh. I was going to tell you. You were going to tell me what exactly? The elevator doors closed. She looked at him directly. That Quinn Capital is mine. Riven blinked. He knew the name. Everyone in business knew the name. Quinn Capital funded major companies, bought struggling firms, and turned small ideas into international success. Their influence stretched into technology, property, media, and finance. He stared at her, almost speechless. You own Quinn Capital? Yes. Riven leaned back against the elevator wall. Alara, that company is worth billions. I know. He let out a breath and shook his head. And all this time I had no idea. You were busy surviving, she said quietly. And after college, life moved fast. Riven looked down for a moment, then back at her. Why didn't you ever tell me? Her voice softened. Because I didn't want you to think I only saw you from a distance. I wanted, one day, to talk to you as myself again. The elevator opened into a private office floor. The space was elegant but not cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sleeping city. A warm lamp glowed near a sitting area, and files were neatly arranged on a wide desk. There were no loud colors, no pointless luxury, just quiet power. Alara set her bag down. Sit. You look exhausted. Riven lowered himself onto the sofa, still trying to understand how the woman he once studied with, laughed with, and almost confessed his feelings to had become one of the most powerful people in the city. Alara handed him a glass of water. Drink first. Then we talk. He accepted it. You already know what Marcus did? She nodded. Not everything. Enough to know he moved too fast and got too confident. Riven gave a bitter laugh. That sounds like Marcus. Alara walked to her desk and opened a file. Tell me everything. So he did. He told her about the day their father died and how Marcus stepped in to manage the company while pretending it was temporary. He told her how he had been pushed into development work, away from contracts and ownership papers. He told her about the signatures, the fake explanations, the trust he had given too freely. He told her about the final envelope and the order to leave the house by nightfall. Alara listened without interrupting. The longer he spoke, the colder her expression became. When he finally finished, silence settled between them. Then she said, he forged some of this. Riven looked up sharply. What? She turned the file toward him. I had my legal team do a quick review before I came to get you. Some transfers may stand for now, but others are weak. Very weak. Riven stared at the documents. You already had people looking into this? She met his eyes. The moment I heard your name, yes. Something deep inside him shifted. All evening he had felt discarded, stripped of meaning. But here was someone who had moved the world the instant she heard he was in pain. His voice dropped. Why? Alara's answer came without hesitation. Because you matter to me. The words stayed in the air between them. Riven swallowed. After all these years? She sat across from him. Do you really think I forgot you? He looked away first. In college, he had loved the way she argued with professors without fear, the way she stayed back after class to help classmates, the way her eyes always seemed to say more than her mouth did. But he had been too uncertain, too focused on family, too convinced there would be more time. Now time had brought them together again, under completely different circumstances. "I thought you moved on," he said quietly. Alara smiled sadly. "I moved forward. That's not always the same thing." Riven's chest tightened. She leaned in slightly. "Listen to me carefully. Marcus took your house, your title, and your position. But he did not take your mind. He did not take your talent. And he definitely did not take the truth." Riven gave a weak smile. "You make it sound simple." "It won't be simple," she said. "It will be painful. Public. Slow in some places, fast in others. But he made a mistake." "What mistake?" "He thought humiliating you would end you." Her eyes hardened. "Men like Marcus are dangerous because they mistake silence for weakness." Riven looked at her for a long moment. "And what do you think silence is?" Alara's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Sometimes it is a wound waiting to become a weapon." The next morning, Riven woke in a guest suite connected to Alara's private residence above the office floor. For a moment he forgot everything. Then the weight of the previous day came rushing back. He sat up, ran a hand over his face, and walked to the window. The city below was already alive. Cars moved like streams of light. People hurried toward another ordinary day, unaware that his own life had been split into a before and after. A knock came at the door. Alara stepped in with coffee. "You look like you barely slept." He took the cup and smiled faintly. "I slept better than I expected." "That means your body surrendered before your mind did." He laughed softly. "That sounds accurate." For a few seconds, they simply stood there, the morning light falling across both of them. It felt strangely intimate, not because of anything dramatic, but because of how natural it felt. Alara broke the silence first. "My legal team is coming in an hour. Also, I want you to meet someone from our technology division." Riven lifted a brow. "Why?" "Because I read your old development proposals last night." "You still had those?" "I keep things that matter." He looked at her, unable to hide the emotion in his face. She continued. "Your software architecture ideas were ahead of their time. Marcus buried them because he didn't understand them, and probably because he knew if you succeeded, he could never control you." Riven looked down at his cup. "I worked on those for years." "I know," she said gently. "And now I want to know if you still believe in them." He hesitated. "After everything that happened, I don't know what I believe in." Alara stepped closer. "Believe in the version of yourself that existed before he broke your trust." Those words settled somewhere deep. Later that day, Riven sat in a boardroom with 3 lawyers, 2 financial investigators, and the head of Quinn Capital's technology branch. It felt unreal. Only yesterday he had been thrown out like he was nothing. Now people were listening when he spoke, asking for his opinion, studying his designs. The legal review was even more disturbing than he expected. Marcus had not only manipulated inheritance documents. He had used company money to cover private debts, shifted funds through shell accounts, and pushed out 2 senior staff members who questioned him. Worst of all, he had recently entered a reckless expansion deal using the family company as collateral. One of the lawyers closed a folder and looked at Riven. "If this goes public the wrong way, your brother's image collapses overnight." Riven sat in silence. Alara, seated beside him, did not look surprised. "And if it goes the right way?" The lawyer answered. "Then Marcus falls, and Riven has a strong case to reclaim control of key assets." Riven felt his pulse rise. For the first time, revenge stopped feeling like a fantasy and started looking like a door. But the door came with pain. That evening, Marcus called. Riven stared at the phone screen while it buzzed in his hand. Alara, sitting across from him in the office lounge, noticed his expression. "Is it him?" Riven nodded. "Answer," she said. He did. Marcus's voice came through smooth and amused. "Well, you disappeared quickly." Riven said nothing. Marcus continued. "I hope you found somewhere decent to sleep. Though I suppose pride doesn't need a pillow." Riven's jaw tightened. "Why are you calling?" A pause. Then Marcus laughed. "Because I know you, little brother. You always look for someone to rescue you." Riven's eyes darkened. "You don't know me at all." "Oh, I know enough. You'll cry over fairness. You'll tell yourself I betrayed you. But deep down, you know father trusted me more." "That's a lie." "Is it?" Marcus said. "Then why did he leave me in charge?" Riven stood and walked toward the window, his free hand shaking. He wanted to shout, but Alara's calm gaze across the room steadied him. Marcus kept talking. "Let me save you some embarrassment. Don't fight this. You were never built for war." Riven answered, voice low and controlled, "Maybe not. But I was built to survive one." The line went quiet for a second. Then Marcus said, more coldly than before, "Careful, Riven." And he hung up. Riven lowered the phone slowly. Alara rose from her seat. "Good." He looked at her. "Good. You didn't break." He called, expecting the old version of you. Riven let out a breath. "I almost gave him exactly that. But you didn't." He turned fully toward her. "I don't know how to do this, Alara. I don't know how to become someone who can fight people like him." She came close enough that he could see the softness return to her face. "You do not need to become cruel to defeat cruelty." His voice dropped. "Then what do I become?" Her answer was quiet and steady. "Whole." Riven stared at her. Every wound in him felt seen. Every fear felt exposed. Yet instead of shame, he felt something else rising between them, something tender and frightening because it meant hope. "Alara," he began. She looked at him, waiting. He had imagined this moment years ago in 100 different ways. None of them looked like this. Two adults scarred by life, standing in the hush of a city office after betrayal and legal warfare, trying not to drown in everything they still felt. "I never forgot you," he admitted. Her eyes softened instantly. Riven continued, "I tried. I told myself it was foolish. That life had moved on. But no one ever felt like you." For one heartbeat, she said nothing. Then she stepped closer and placed her hand lightly over his. "Riven," she whispered, "you were never the part of my past I wanted to forget." His breath caught. He did not pull away. Neither did she. And in that fragile, aching silence, as the city lights burned beyond the glass and the storm with Marcus gathered strength, Riven realized the worst night of his life had led him to the one person who still knew how to find him in the dark. But even as love began to return where pain had lived for years, danger was already moving faster than either of them knew. Because Marcus Hale had started to suspect that Riven was not alone. And when Marcus discovered who was standing beside his brother, he would make a choice that would change everything. The days that followed moved faster than Riven expected. Meetings filled the hours, documents stacked across long conference tables, and legal strategies slowly formed like pieces of a puzzle. Quinn Capital's legal team dug deeper into Marcus Hale's financial history, and the more they uncovered, the clearer the truth became. Marcus had not only betrayed his brother, he had gambled recklessly with the company their father built. Riven sat in Alara's office late one evening, staring at a screen filled with numbers and contracts. His mind struggled to absorb everything. The empire Marcus believed he had secured was already cracking beneath its own weight. Alara entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea. "You've been staring at that screen for 2 hours," she said gently. Riven rubbed his eyes. "Every line I read makes it worse." She placed the cup beside him. "Worse for Marcus, not for you." He looked at her. "I never wanted to destroy him." Alara pulled a chair beside him. "You're not destroying him. The truth is." Riven leaned back, his voice low. "He's still my brother." Alara nodded slowly. "And that is why this hurts." Outside the windows, the city lights stretched endlessly. Cars moved like glowing rivers beneath the buildings. Riven watched them quietly, feeling the strange weight of destiny pressing against his chest. "When my parents died," he said softly, "Marcus promised we would take care of each other." Alara listened without interrupting. "I believed him," Riven continued. "I thought everything we built was something we shared." "And now?" she asked. He turned toward her. "Now I don't know who he really was." Alara reached out and gently placed her hand over his. "Sometimes the people closest to us show their true selves only when power enters the room." Riven looked down at her hand. It felt steady, warm, and real, the opposite of the chaos that had swallowed his life. "I don't know how I would have survived this week without you," he admitted. Her expression softened. "You didn't survive because of me." "Then why?" "Because you refused to become what he wanted you to be." Riven smiled faintly. "And what was that?" "Broken." The following morning, the truth exploded into the public world. News reports began circulating about irregular financial activity within Hale Industries. Reporters called investors. Investors called lawyers. Lawyers called Marcus. By noon, the company board demanded an emergency meeting. Marcus stood at the head of the boardroom table, trying to keep control of the situation. His suit was perfect, his voice calm, but the tension in his eyes betrayed him. This is a misunderstanding, he said firmly. One of the board members pushed a folder across the table. Then explain these accounts. Marcus opened the folder and felt his stomach tighten. Inside were documents, bank transfers, shell company registrations, unauthorized loans. Evidence. Where did you get this? Marcus asked sharply. The board member leaned back in his chair. Your brother's legal team. Marcus froze. Riven, he repeated. The room fell silent. Another board member spoke. Yes. Apparently he's working with Quinn Capital. Marcus's heart skipped. Quinn Capital. The name struck him like lightning. He knew the company's power. If Quinn Capital was backing Riven, the situation was far more dangerous than he expected. Marcus's hands slowly tightened into fists beneath the table. So he found someone to fight his battles, Marcus said coldly. Across the city, Riven watched the same news broadcast from Alara's office. The screen showed reporters outside the Hale Industries headquarters, speaking about corruption, investigation, and leadership disputes. Riven turned the television off. This is happening faster than I imagined, he said quietly. Alara stood beside him, arms crossed thoughtfully. Marcus built his empire on arrogance, she replied. That kind of foundation collapses quickly. Riven looked down. I didn't want it to happen like this. Alara studied him for a moment. Do you want to stop it? He hesitated. Then he shook his head slowly. No. That evening, Riven received another phone call. Marcus. This time Riven answered immediately. Marcus's voice sounded different, colder, sharper. So this is your plan? Riven said nothing. Marcus continued, anger rising. You hide behind investors and lawyers like a coward. Riven's voice remained calm. I'm not hiding. You're trying to steal what belongs to me. What belongs to you? Riven repeated quietly. You signed it away. Marcus snapped. Riven's tone hardened slightly. You tricked me. Business is not about trust, Marcus said harshly. It's about winning. Silence stretched between them. Then Riven said something Marcus did not expect. You already lost. Marcus laughed bitterly. You think a few accusations scare me? It's not the accusations, Riven replied. It's the truth. Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Who's helping you? Riven looked toward Alara, who stood quietly near the window watching the city. Marcus waited. Finally, Riven answered. Someone who believes in me. Marcus scoffed. That won't save you. And the call ended. Days later, the final board meeting took place. Investors, lawyers, and executives filled the room. Tension hung in the air like thunder waiting to break. Marcus stood near the head of the table again, but this time his confidence was thinner. The doors opened. Riven walked in. Whispers spread across the room instantly. Marcus's eyes burned with anger. You shouldn't be here, Marcus said. Riven met his gaze calmly. I helped build this company. I belong here as much as you do. Then another figure entered the room. Alara Quinn. The whispers grew louder. Marcus stared at her, recognition dawning slowly across his face. You, he muttered. Alara spoke clearly. Quinn Capital now holds a controlling interest in Hale Industries through legal acquisition of several debt agreements. Marcus's face drained of color. That's impossible. Alara placed a folder on the table. It's already done. One of the board members cleared his throat. Based on the investigation findings and financial violations, the board is voting to remove Marcus Hale as CEO. Marcus slammed his hand against the table. You can't do this. But the vote happened quickly. One by one, the board members raised their hands. The decision was unanimous. Marcus Hale was removed. The room fell silent. Marcus looked at Riven with hatred burning in his eyes. You planned this. Riven shook his head slowly. No, he said quietly. You did. Marcus turned and stormed out of the room. And just like that, the empire he had stolen began to crumble. Later that night, Riven stood on the balcony of Alara's penthouse, watching the city lights stretch endlessly beneath them. Everything felt surreal. Alara, he said softly. She stepped beside him. Yes, I thought losing everything was the end of my life. She looked at him. And now? Riven smiled faintly. Now I think it was the beginning. Alara studied his face carefully. Are you angry? She asked. Less than I expected. And your brother? Riven looked out across the skyline. I hope one day he understands what he destroyed. Alara's voice softened. You didn't lose everything. Riven turned toward her. No, he agreed quietly. And then he gently took her hand. The warmth between them felt stronger than revenge, stronger than victory. For the first time in years, Riven felt peace. I should have told you how I felt back then, he said. Elara smiled. You're telling me now. Riven stepped closer. I love you. Her eyes glistened slightly under the soft city lights. I've loved you longer than you know, she replied. And in that quiet moment above the sleeping city, Riven realized something profound. The brother who tried to destroy him had unknowingly pushed him toward the one person who would help rebuild his life. Pain had brought him there, but love would carry him forward. And if this story touched your heart, please like, comment, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support means the world and helps us continue sharing powerful stories like this with people everywhere.